You can be a part of bringing the dreams of families to life when you consider egg donation with Fairfax Egg Bank. It's easier than you think. Fill out an application online, meet for screening appointments, and begin. Because your efforts are so important, you'll be compensated up to $60,000. So if you're a female between the ages of 19 and 30 and are a healthy non-smoker, contact Fairfax Egg Bank today. FairfaxEggBank.com. You could be compensated up to $60,000 for your time and effort in helping a family grow. FairfaxEggBank.com. They say it takes a village, but raising a family might not be for you right now or ever. And that's just fine, because you can still be a part of bringing the dreams of families to life when you consider egg donation with Fairfax Egg Bank. It's easier than you think. Fill out an application online, meet for screening appointments, and begin. The retrieval process is quick and painless and only takes about 20 minutes. Because your efforts are so important, you'll be compensated up to $60,000. This isn't a decision to take lightly, but the ability to give the gift to family and be compensated to follow your own dreams, that's a village working together. So if you're a female between the ages of 19 and 30 and are a healthy non-smoker, contact Fairfax Egg Bank today. FairfaxEggBank.com, and begin the easy process of donation. Remember, you could be compensated up to $60,000 for your time and effort in helping a family grow. Use it towards the future you want for yourself. Find out more at FairfaxEggBank.com.
You know that fresh produce is the best produce. That's why at Kroger, we invest in local farmers to bring you seasonal picks that taste fresh from the farm good, like sweet corn, refreshing watermelon, and juicy peaches. So whether you're a delivery lover, a picker-upper, or you shop in-store, your local produce always tastes 100% fresh, or you get a 100% refund guaranteed. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Write that down for me, Saito. Write that down for me, Saito.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Write That Down. I am one of your hosts, Justin Knipper. I edit MoreFightGameMedia.com. I'm a staff writer at F4W Online and WrestlingObserver.com. I'm back with Japan's leading pro wrestling author, historian, broadcast journalist, sociologist, Mr. Fumi Saito. Welcome to part 2 of our Joshi Pro Wrestling History miniseries, our deep dive into women's pro wrestling in Japan. Today we picked up where we left off on the last episode before we really dive into Joshi wrestling in the 80s and 90s. Fumi did a recap of what we talked about last week, and then we dove into talking about the Mimi Hagiwara era. We talked about Jaguar, Yokota, and Devil Masame's early days. We talked about the legendary Crush Gals era. You hear their song in the background right now. That's them. The introduction of JWP, Jackie Sato's JWP in 1986, the second big women's promotion. Not big, but the second promotion. We spent a lot of time towards the end of the episode talking Bull Nakano. We talked about early 90s era as well, 92, 93, 94. And we're going to talk a lot more about that specific era of All Japan Women's Wrestling and LLPW and a lot more next week on part 3. But today we did our best to get through as much as we could. We focused on Bull, the Yokohama show, 1993 Yokohama show, kind of legendary one. There's a lot to unpack. This is another dense episode. If you have questions, comments, let us know. Get at us on social media. All right, if you haven't already, before we get started, please subscribe to the Fight Game Media Network podcast feed. You can subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Downcast, wherever you download your podcast. It helps us out a ton. Okay. And also, by the way, I have a book out on Amazon right now called Stronger Than All. It's a digital match guide to every New Japan Strong match of the first 2 years of episodes. There's a sale going on right now this month, and if you're interested, you can pick it up for $2.99 US. So, all right, plug it out of the way. Let's get into the good stuff. Let's get into Joshi Pro Wrestling History, Part 2, 1980s, 1990s.
We were talking about television. That's how we got this way. That the Channel 8, Fuji Television, was always behind this big idea of women's wrestling to be a different entity, a completely different entity from men's wrestling, pro wrestling in Japan in the from Rikidozan era to Giant Baba, Antonio Inoki era, all the way to this date, I guess, that wrestling is very popular. There was a dark age, but the Fuji Television wanted to create something completely different from that aspect of pro wrestling. Pro wrestling, nonetheless, but the women's wrestling was something completely the same product, but completely different approach, and deal with different marketing, different there was different audience. Is what I'm trying to get to.
And it cultivated that
Right.
that kind of younger audience, that female teenage audience that never was there and never really came back either.
Right, because they weren't really wrestling fans. They were Maha Fumiyake fans. They were Beauty Pair fans, Maki Ueda fans, Jackie Sato fans. Yeah. Then there was more clear baby face and heel setup than the men's wrestling at the time. See, if you remember, Japanese wrestling, of course, basically at the time, Japanese babyface against American heel, but it's always subtle. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of almost subtle. But all these Japanese women, like 30 wrestler roster, and the one wearing red is babyface, and the black tracksuit top and bottom, that the black one is the heel, that the beauty pair had a rival or black pair, and yeah, it was really easy to understand, like a first time viewer on Channel 8, All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling TV program, that you can start watching it today and understand it. Does that make sense?
Simple.
Then the babyface will work like a babyface, and heels will work like a heels. And they don't use the word babyface or heels though, but it's clear by watching television.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but right. For those listeners out there that didn't listen to our first episode, let's use next 3 minutes to go over kind of like a college course, class.
Let's recap.
We have to go over last week's material. There was women's wrestling as early as 1948. The war ended, and there was a war, World War II. There was a Pearl Harbor. There was Hiroshima. There was Nagasaki. We went over that. Yeah, because today's audience sometimes don't even know there was a war.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
of course
almost
they do
100
know,
years
but
ago now, 80.
It's like a 75, 76 years ago, 1945. The war was over, and then they don't. A lot of the people probably, well, what does that got to do with anything to do with wrestling? It does, because there was a thing, GHQ, General Headquarters, Japanese occupation, right? And by General MacArthur. In 1951, 6 years after the war, there was still the U.S. occupation in Japan, GHQ. And 1951, wrestling was brought from America, and Bobby Brown's crew that had a tribute to troops. And that's where Rikidozan debuted as pretty much, I wouldn't say first Japanese professional wrestler, because there were the people before that, But in popular history, yes, Rikidozan was the first Japanese wrestler, American style professional wrestler that
First
made it
superstar.
big. Yeah. And same 1951, Mildred Barks' crew came in the same year that they ran a show in Japan, women's wrestling show in Japan, as early as 1951. Amazing, right? That the seed was planted by Mildred Park and Great Mae Young, and the same Great Mae Young, and they trained young Japanese wrestlers, then left. Then there was a birth of women's professional wrestling. And Rikidozan's Nippon Pro Wrestling never used women's wrestling. Rikidozan himself I was told that he resented women's pro wrestling at the time, and they never really used it. There was a different image to it, right? But therefore, you never know what works. That the women's wrestling in Japan had completely different development and a completely different evolution. That the women's wrestling company, all women wrestling company, existed all through this last 7 years. That's the basic history, And as early as 1955, there was like a 5, 6, 7 women's company in Japan. Tokyo Tokyo Women's Wrestling. Not this. You have Tokyo Joshi now, right? But that's completely different. Same
not
name.
DDT produced Tokyo Joshi Pro. This was
Right, but there was such thing as Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling back in 1955. All Japan Women's Wrestling, not the women's, All Japan Women's Wrestling that we know of. And there's another All Japan Pro Wrestling. There was Hiroshima Joshi Pro Wrestling. It's like a 6, 7 different company running shows around the country. Amazing. I mean, I'm talking about mid 50s though. But we gotta fast forward a little bit because these 50s and 60s women's wrestling in Japan weren't as well documented as it should have been, because the sports paper or even the pro wrestling magazine, newsstand magazine, they didn't really cover women's wrestling as much. Kind of prejudice, but they weren't covered by sports pages, those sports section of the tabloids. Even that there was no really much physical record to the match result or title match records and all these things. It's really, yeah, it's a shame, that didn't really have written history on it all through 50s and 60s. And we talked about it in the last episode that it was actually young Rasi Ogawa, 21-year-old Rasi Ogawa. He did all the research and dug out the result and that made this lineage and the title match history and result as much as he could, and then he tried to put fill the gap a little bit. Wasn't complete though, but yeah. Young Rasi Ogawa started working for All Japan Pro Wrestling back in 1978.
He's been working there his whole life.
Pretty much. Yeah, right. That's good though. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's one of the last from that era. And he was behind a lot of it too. He saw it happen.
Yeah, right.
And also he was
Matsunaga brothers. Matsunaga brothers are a very interesting one. That the Takashi Matsunaga, Kenji Matsunaga, Kunimatsu Matsunaga, and Toshikuni Matsunaga, 4 brothers ran the company. Yeah. And they were the one running 250 to 300 shows a year for 20, 30-year period. It's like a more barnstorming style that not as when the TV came, yeah, that they run TV type shows with TV budgets. But when it's not TV taping, they would go to the smallest town in that you can find, that you probably can't find these little town in the map even, that they ran shows.
200 or 300 shows in Japan. You're going to a lot of small towns. That means.
Yeah. Then they never even took bullet trains. Always on the bus, every day, night after night, day after day.
That's hardcore.
And they going to town, and the girls and these company guys and the wrestling wrestlers who were the one building the ring, setting up the concession, setting up the even seatings, because they had their own these chairs. Yeah, seriously, they carry their own the steel chairs, for wrestling. They were like at least 500 chairs in that truck. Oh, all the way till like 90s. Yeah. So they were able to run wrestling shows in the middle of nowhere, basically. And that's another method. It's like old school 50s wrestling in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the TV came in, and then we talked about Maha Fumiake's era. She was the one who started singing, and she was a big, huge superstar. And the women's wrestling all of a sudden got so popular and commercial and became pretty much TV show and TV product to be exact, 1974. And Maha Fumiake's big boom period only lasted a little less than 3 years. 2 years and 8 months to be exact. Much like Tiger Mask, era. We still talk about Satoru Sayama's Tiger Mask era because it was so huge and phenomenal, and that was so groundbreaking. That the Tiger Mask was showing something that nobody has ever seen, right? That the Maha Fumiake was exactly that in 1974. Pretty young 17-year-old wrestlers doing this thing in the ring, and it's on TV every week. And wow, it's around the same time, I think, Justin, you were a bit too young to remember roller derby and roller game.
I remember
Same.
roller derby from my dad. My dad really liked roller derby.
Oh,
My dad-
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
It
era.
came back in the 90s. It did come back.
Right.
In the
Oh,
90s
they
briefly.
tried few different times. Right.
I remember watching
Yeah.
it, but roller derby is definitely one of those sports or quasi sports that is kind of like a relative of pro wrestling.
Very, very similar. Yeah. And when extinct, you know?
I think it's more of a legitimate sport now. I think they changed some of the rules.
Yeah,
I know
and
there
then
are
also
some,
it's not a roller skate. They use inline rollerblade type of skating, you know?
Mm.
And yeah, it's like they've been like a relative and cousin of professional wrestling.
Mhm.
And like in LA, that same referee was being referee. You know, one night at the Olympic Auditorium, those guys were refereeing roller game, you know, like Thunderbirds and all that. And then the Thursday night, they come in the referee wrestling matches, male maskers. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So, but yeah, same time. Yeah, because like a Thursday night or something, I watched, you know, Tokyo Bombers in the roller derby, roller games. Then there was Friday Friday must be wrestling. So either, yeah, they switched time, but the women's wrestling was always on channel 8. You know, I don't want to sound prejudiced, but I did not really follow women's wrestling on TV as much as I should have, or as much as I was paying attention to, you know, men's wrestling, you know, Inoki's New Japan and Baba's All Japan, you know, twice a week. And there was another company called IWE, that the International Wrestling, that enterprise. So there were men's 3 different company running primetime TV show 3 times a week. Your parents will get mad, right? You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't really watching. And also, Maha Fumiake and Beauty Pair period, that they appeal to teenage girls. You know, this completely different audience and marketing. And they were selling merchandise way before WWF was selling merchandise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was definitely more of. I'm trying to find a comparison.
Teen Idol,
Yeah,
Pop Idol.
Yeah, Teen Idol, Pop Idol in the 60s, 70s, but
That's why I brought up roller derby, roller games.
it also
Kind of similar.
It also was more marketed to, like, there wasn't a when we bring up Teen Idol in the States, we often add the element of like falling in love. There's some element of love, like it's usually between somebody loves the singer, you know. There's where in this kind of idol, you know, there might be that, but there's also just more support. It's more of a, it's not. There's no sexual undertone. It's more
Partridge Family.
Partridge Family. That could be a good one, but even still, it's.
Yeah, we talked about monkeys and basically rollers, or.
But when we get to the singing, that's why I'm trying to. They become a little bit more than wrestlers. They become just. I guess it would be. It's not the same. I'm struggling to find a good comparison. But I guess if you think about,
but it's wrestling.
But if you think about old entertainers like, I don't know, Dean Martin or even Frank Sinatra, all these guys would do. They would act. They would sing. They would do movies. They would host shows. They were kind of multi-talented, and that was kind of the standard. And I think that old school show business sense applied to Joshi Pro Wrestling. There was that element of
it's
show
very 70s approach.
High level, sophisticated show business in addition to the pro wrestling.
Yeah, so Maha Fumiake and Beauty Pair, Maki Ueda, Jackie Sato, they all came to quiz shows and variety shows,
right.
Other than the wrestling shows. See, John Baba Inoki made appearance occasionally, but it was like a very special. But these girls wrestlers would appear and pop up in different TV shows in same channel. You know,
yeah, they were more personalities. You know, like you said, Baba was a wrestler. So there's nothing. If there's nothing else to talk about, he's doing the wrestler thing. He's a wrestler, but. And later on, more men would start to do that in Japan too. You see somebody like Makabe is like the king of
eating sweets.
Those
like
variety
sweets.
shows. He's on all the time, even though he's
well, like in '90s, Onita was doing it too.
Yeah,
the king of deathmatch guy, but when he comes on TV, he's funny guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kind of outrageous. Yeah.
So that the element was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unique. It's unique. And I think
Yeah.
the best way to understand it or try to understand it is just to go out, watch what you can, listen to the records and you know, experience it for yourself, because as a Westerner, it's just really different than.
And what's unique about
wrestling here?
All Japan Women's Wrestling's approach was that they didn't make these superstars overstay their welcome in a way that there was a rules that kind of dreaded, but no drinking, no boyfriend, and retire at before age of 25. And they really did that. All the way till like a Dump Matsumoto, Chigusa Nagayo era. They make you retire at before age of 25, so you can go on with life and get married and have kids or something like that.
There was like element of purity to the top idol / wrestlers too. There's something.
Yeah, the Maha Fumiyaki retired when she was the 20. Yeah, it was like a really quick 3 years. But when you were 7th grade and 8th grade, 3 years seemed like forever, huh?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
So there was an era. There was an era that when they retired, these teenage fans, that the whole bunch of them, they retired too. And after Beauty Pair, there was a short Mimi Hagiwara era that another pop singer turned wrestler, but she was not as athletic, but she was a star nonetheless. And there's a Mimi Hagiwara era. Then there was teenage Jaguar Yokota and teenage Devil Masami. See, all these girls start wrestling when they were like right out of 9th grade, 10th grade. You know what I'm saying? And some of the wrestlers with stardom, they're awful young too, right?
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that it just got easier to be an NFL fan, even if you live far away. Like maybe you like the Bears, but you're hibernating in Panthers territory. But with NFL Sunday Ticket, your out-of-market team is never more than a short distance away. Specifically, the distance from you to your remote control. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
What's up? It's Kaylee Cuoco. When it comes to travel, we all have a happy place. I just went to my happy place. I just went to Maui, and it was truly amazing. Priceline has always been about getting you to your happy place for a happy price with deals you really can't find anywhere else. Like up to 60% off select hotels in Costa Rica or 5-star hotels for 2-star prices in Cabo.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
That's right. I remember the show we went to a couple of years ago. Now we saw Azumi, who's
like 15.
She was like in high school, like a teenager. She was like a
she
little girl. She looked like one of my students.
Okay.
So when I see her now, like she's a woman,
all
now,
grown up.
It's different. It's definitely it's different. It's different.
Yeah, but yes, there was the only one company that All Japan Women was women's wrestling at the time. You have to wait. Yeah, and we still have to cover this. That the different companies a little bit later on. We had to wait until 1986. Japan Joshi Pro Wrestling started. The second company. They lasted until 92. So it wasn't all that long, but that Japan Joshi became two companies, JWP and LLPW, in 92. But we still have to cover this in 80s because there was another huge era in Crush Girls. Chigusa Nagayo and Lioness Asuka. That was almost as big or maybe bigger than Beauty Pair because they're athletic. And the magazine I worked for, Deluxe Pro Wrestling, that the sister magazine of Weekly Pro or Baseball Magazine family, that the Deluxe Pro Wrestling became, there was the reason for it. When the monthly magazine became Weekly Pro Wrestling, that the sales skyrocketed, right? The circulation. And there's another magazine called Deluxe Pro Wrestling at the time monthly magazine. The monthly magazine kind of declined in circulation, and what they did was made Deluxe Pro Wrestling portion into women's magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a magazine inside magazine. There's a monthly Crash Girls that was popular. That they covered, only Crash Girls and their world. And the magazine was really popular in their own way, and that too. And Rossi was actually a manager of this Crash Girls era. That they were this, Fuji Television was, still running their weekly shows and better time slot. At the same time, yeah, Crash Girls era. We can't forget that the Jumping Bomb Angels too.
Yes.
Yeah. And
was it
some of these
kind of around
80s,
the same era?
Yeah, it's the same time. Yeah, same era, exact same era. Within the country of Japan, Crash Girls was much bigger star than the Jumping Bomb Angels. And Crash Girls, Lioness, Asuka, and Chigusa Nagayo, along with their heel opponent, Dump Matsumoto, and their group, their faction, they had that they toured Madison Square Garden in 1985, 1986.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that?
Yeah, Boston Garden too.
Yeah, but they actually didn't make that big of an impact. And instead, that the Jumping Bomb Angels were a bigger hit in America because they looked like your almost stereotypical Japanese woman with long, straight black hair, right?
I think if you're an old school fan, WWF fan,
from 80s,
you might have seen them on one of the pay-per-views in the late 80s. I think it was 88.
Yeah. And then their one set opponent, the Glamour Girls, the Leilani Kai and Julie Martin.
Mm-hmm.
They had program, and they didn't bring in too many wrestlers at the time. They kept doing the Jumping Bomb Angels against the Glamour Girls all over the place. I mean, again, same opponent, same card, a little bit different content, but they just worked against each other forever. But they are the women's wrestler that really changed the perception of women's wrestling in America. Was a big impact, wasn't it?
I think so.
Because
wrestling was very advanced.
Yeah, what they expected from slippery maneuvers and missile drop kicks and bridge and women doing German suplexes and all these things. And
it was a developed style by then. By the time it came to the States, it had almost 2 decades of cultivating itself of what it was, the style in the ring and maybe heel dynamic,
and also American audience was just expecting when you hear women's wrestling, aged Fabulous Moolah against her own opponent, right?
Mm-hmm.
In one match, So I think Jumping Bomb Angel in America was pretty much the first experience the American audience actually able to sit down and watch Japanese women's wrestling. That's what I'm trying to get to. And they had a real good time, and they had 2 long tours, 7-month stay here and another 7-month stay. And Itsuki Yamazaki ended up living in America, and she's still in New York. Yeah.
Really? Huh.
And to this day, yeah.
Wow.
She reopened her restaurant in New York again.
How about Tateno?
She's back in Japan, but she's a bar owner. Yeah, nightclub owner. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, different era. But yeah, so there was the attempt that to bring Japanese women's wrestling into American market. That it was successful, but that wasn't forever. That people just remember Jumping Bomb Angel from that certain period, right?
It was very different from everything else in WWF at the time. It was still, and I think it still had some momentum from WrestleMania 1 with Wendy Richter and Cyndi Lauper. There was still a little bit of, there was still some momentum from a year or 2 after that.
Yeah, but basically back to Moolah style.
Yeah. After they stopped bringing in the Japanese talent, Judy Martin, Leilani Kai, I mean, it would eventually kind of go back to that or just disappear completely in the 90s.
Yeah, and then you had to wait until Alundra Blayze era.
Yep, 94 or so.
Yeah. In the meantime, we got to get to that today, but we got to talk about Medusa a little bit later on tonight. But the Mimi Hagiwara era, then Crush Girls era. Then before that, the teenage Jaguar Yokota and teenage Devil Masami, right? They were a few years older than Crush Girls. Okay, but the Crush Girls became such a huge star in mid '80s in Japan, and it was a beauty pair, Mahafumiyake era all over again. They were not that far apart, but you know, like we said, the company was making these superstar retire relatively early age. Therefore, you have another set of superstar, being brought up, and I guess that's how it was. And when Crush Girls was huge, it was huge. But when they started retiring like in 88, 89, but they would come back later on. Okay, we'll get to that. These huge group of fans also left. Yeah. And the same thing happened, when Crush Girls days were over, that all those that huge group of fans, they retired too. That was like in 88, 89. Yeah.
You should also mention that, excuse me, especially Chigusa and Nagayo, the style that they were wrestling in the ring, it was really reminiscent of what was popular at the time, like UWF style martial arts style.
Oh, yeah. She started working like Akira Maeda with spin kicks and the karate. Yeah.
Same idea. Before. That was really different too.
Yeah.
Because she still did the singing and, the albums.
Sure.
But the style was
musical,
updated. It
stage play. In movies, of course. Yeah. Styles updated. Spinning heel kicks and right. They adapt. Oh, even the UWF kicking pads, right?
Yeah. Oh, sure. And same haircuts even.
Right.
It was very similar
to different. Yeah.
And it would appeal to men a little bit more too. I think that's where we started to see more of that.
I still didn't follow Crush Girls though.
No.
Yeah.
It was like you said, it was.
Yeah,
really...
one given Sunday, sometimes if you remember Korakuen Hall in Tokyo, you run 2 different wrestling shows in the same building. Noon show, women's wrestling, and 6 o'clock show for men's wrestling. They come in and change the ring and all these things, and I usually skipped women's wrestling in noon show, but they will come back for New Japan shows on same building on Sunday night or something.
And they
I
still
wasn't
do that
prejudiced, but it was hard for me to walk into. Oh, 2 shows in the same building?
Sunday.
Noon shows and 6:30 shows? Yeah. Oh, yeah, they do that too. Saturdays and Sundays. Maybe that's amazing for American fans, huh?
Yeah, because it became a tradition. It became a tradition in Japan.
And also, right in the center of Tokyo, it's the easiest access. You just get on the subway, get on the train, and go there, and just watch wrestling.
And
now there's the Tokyo Dome right next to it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, what's better than that?
Right. So the Crush Girls, and also that the mid 80s into late 80s, that the VCR, VHS videos were already in fashion. That it's really hard to find Mahafumiyake and beauty pair footage, and now it's popping up on YouTube and stuff like that. But not everybody had VCR then. But during Crush Girls era, every home had VCR, so it's easy to find these videos. Yeah,
and
it's still good to this day.
And with any of those groups, from Beauty Pair to Crush Gals, with their music, with their albums, I mean, were these songs pretty big hit singles, or were they just big within the wrestling community?
They had 1 or 2 that regular hit. Yeah. Because they were on singing late night singing show too. So
so that shows how much of a breakthrough,
popular.
They transcended.
And she made right after retiring from wrestling, Chigusa Nagayo made a couple movies as an actor. Yeah.
They broke up before. I mean, so Nagayo never really retired.
Yeah, the storyline breaking up, and they did that. Yeah, right. So, the hindsight, they did a lot of different things. Yeah, But all in all, still Crush Girls era when you look back. So those are little details.
Yeah, and I mean, if anybody out there hasn't seen the footage from the mid '80s of
Chigusa Nagayo against Lioness Asuka single match, yeah, that happened a few times.
Pretty amazing crowd reactions, pretty intense battles between the two. They were special for sure.
Yeah,
and even today, people we're still talking about them. So
right, and finally in 1989, both Chigusa Nagayo and Lioness Asuka both retired. That officially retired. They would come back a little bit later on, but the first official retirement, and somehow that this, All Japan women's wrestling crew looked skeleton. That's when Rossi made a plan to bring in Medusa full time. Spring of 1989.
Okay.
Yeah.
Medusa Miceli, Alundra Blayze.
Yeah. She was brought in. She was, 26 at the time? Yeah. So they already broke the 25-year-old rule then. That too. Yeah. But Medusa already had 2-year run with AWA and AWA champion, and also being manager of Bad Company, if you remember Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond.
Paul Diamond, yeah.
And young DDP was in there, younger. Yeah. And but the Vern Gagne's AWA wasn't as serious about women's wrestling, and Medusa had her opponent, as a champion, but pretty soon the women's program, they kind of dropped, And WCW was around the time NWA Crockett into WCW, and was in transition period, and they didn't have a women's division, and WWF didn't have a women's division. Well, kind of had, but it wasn't serious about, even Diva yet, And I guess the timing was perfect that Medusa was brought in, and I thought she was going to have just tours, but no, she brought in 10 suitcases and she moved to Japan and started going Japanese language school. So she learned the language, and also she was put in the bus. Now you have 250 shows a year schedule. Yeah,
that's serious. That's pretty unheard of. I mean, she was a trailblazer.
Yeah, then also none of the girls spoke any English in that bus. Can you imagine?
Will really force you to learn Japanese.
And this complicated 6-man tag team, 6-woman tag team, the high spots they have to go through.
There's a lot of non-verbal communication.
Yeah. But what was a breakthrough was that the following year, 1990, when they started doing the wrestlers MMA kind of thing, that Medusa and younger Aja Kong had kickboxing fight, not work. It's actual kickboxing.
It was like
crazy
early,
idea, right?
It was like early MMA.
I guess Medusa had this feeling that it was do or die situation, and also had to prove something to the very locker room, because other girls were some of the girls were iffy. Why was she brought in? Because most of them felt that they were better wrestlers than Medusa were, right? And just some of the girls felt that Medusa was getting a special treatment, because upon arrival there was a singing program, being produced, and she had a singing, the CDs and picture books and image videos and all these, marketing vehicles that the Rossi came up with, and just if she wasn't going to be a superstar, you were doing something wrong, right? Rossi did everything to make her a new superstar. This was right after Crash Girls era. You got to gain, develop a new audience, and the whole strategy of it. But all in all, Medusa had a lot to prove to the audience, prove to the locker room. Yeah, both, right? Like a sandwiched, and learning the language at the same time. Oh my gosh,
it takes a lot of guts to do that. It sounds like what it sounds like, but geez, especially without something like the internet available when you're
there was no internet.
I mean,
and actually there was no cell phone. Nobody had cell phone in 1990 yet. Oh God, yeah. Oh, she used to leave 10-minute message on my answering machine. I mean, answering machine was not short. It's like a actual mini cassette tape, right? So you can record long time, And then a new device, came out like in 1991 that you can listen to your answering machine from outside.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, the communications and all these things. And I guess that the Rossi and I were friends, so I got involved more. Yeah, around that time. It was interesting, because it was 1 year before inter-promotional program started. You have to wait until 1992 that the All Japan women against FMW women, like Megumi Kudo and that the Maidomari and all these girls.
Tsuchiya.
That era. Oh yeah, that Debbie Malenko Hasegawa against Maidomari and Tsuchiya. It's like you're talking miscommunicating or that the different, upbringing in wrestling. That all these FMW women's wrestlers were trained with men's method, right?
Mm-hmm.
Onita trained them, so therefore it's like they work like men, and that's just like that made matches interesting. And there was the All Japan women against JWP girls, All Japan women against LLPW. Okay, we have to go back. 1986, there was they started Japan Joshi Pro Wrestling as a second group. All the wrestlers coached by late Jackie Sato.
Mm-hmm.
Part one half of Beauty Pair. Yeah, she made comeback as a wrestler, short-lived, but mostly she coached all these Kyuri Suzuki or the Mayumi Ozaki, the Dynamite Kanzai, you name, the JWP or Japan Joshi, that group of girls, completely different from All Japan women's. That made it interesting because not all the women's wrestlers were All Japan style women's wrestler anymore. There was a different kind that it was eye opening, right? Like trained by different wrestlers, trained by another method. Wow, women can work different style too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you could really start to see the differences in not just the style, but the approach to everything in the ring.
Yeah, sometimes clashes in styles, but that made match that much more interesting because yes, Dynamite Kanzai was really good in her own way. Later on there was a program Aja Kong against Dynamite Kanzai. It's like wow, they work like men, right?
Yeah. I mean, It was just it was a kind of a new approach. It was brutal at times. It was rough.
Yeah.
It was also the time when, like we talked about, early MMA, Pancrase, EWF, this
at the time,
harder hitting style.
Same audience was watching both men and women's wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think this might have allowed Joshi Pro Wrestling to start to expand its market to the 90s because a lot more men started to watch.
Yeah, and then there was a time in early 90s when a lot of the smaller independent company in Japan started. Not just All Japan and New Japan and UWF groups, but FMW, the Universal. Universal is a company that brought in the Mexican genuine lucha libre. That the Asai, that Yoshihiro Asai before he was Ultimate Dragon. See, he was New Japan Dojo student back in 1986, 87. That he was told that he was too small to debut in Japan, and he packed up and went to Mexico in 87 and made it on his own success story. That we have to talk about Ultimate Dragon sometimes in different episodes. But he was brought back along with all these genuine Mexican talent like El Santo, the Villanos, the Kendo, the Kato Kunri, all these genuine Mexican talent that they had Mexican Lucha Libre show in Japan for the first time in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And the All Japan women helped that group, and they sent All Japan women's superstars like young Bison Kimura, the Aja Kong, the young Kyoko Inoue, they worked show, the Universal Lucha Libre show. And these fans who came to see genuine Mexican Lucha Libre went home becoming women's wrestling fans. That was interesting. Yeah, because wasn't expecting it. But you know what? What we saw today, like, women's wrestling was the greatest thing or something. And then the Crush Girls, as popular as they were, they didn't really draw men's audience. And not to take away, from them, but they were really, really popular. But like myself, I didn't really follow women's wrestling until then. That the Crush Girls really appealed to teenage female audience. It's almost specialized in it, and didn't. Yeah, as a result, they didn't really draw men's regular wrestling fans. And by Rashi sending these, women's wrestler to this Universal Lucha Libre show, these Japanese fans, they were somewhat prejudiced at the time, right, about women's wrestling. Well, that's for girls, right? But they ended up witnessing women's wrestling for the first time during that show. It's like, wow, is that what they do, right? And they stopped coming to women's wrestling shows. Therefore, Nakano era starts. Yeah.
So this would be around what, 88, 89?
92, 91, 92?
92, because I know Nakano was, she was a big name, but she was always a bit in the shadow.
Yeah, she started, because she was a second from Dump Matsumoto. Dump Matsumoto retired around the same time Crush Girls retired. They're all gone. Then all of a sudden, 20-year-old Nakano became the number one wrestler. Yeah. That's also Masa era. Yeah, because both Crush Girls are gone. Red belt, that you still have the top red belt, the WWWA, Worldwide Women's Wrestling Association world champion, the red belt we call it. That there was a Pacific title that's a white belt. That tradition remains all the way to today. See, Stardom's red belt is the biggest one. The second best was the white belt, much like your WWE Universal Champion and Intercontinental title kind of thing. And Nakano was put as a red belt champion, heel, but didn't matter. That just the Nakano had to be the one to carry the company. Yeah, and she was successful. And what was successful was that Nakano and her faction were the ones that brought men's audience into the building. Now it's completely different era. Then, yeah, go ahead.
So what are some reasons do you think that was back then? And why would Nakano, what was it about her specifically or particularly that how did she, do you think, brought in
the
more of a
men's audience? Because her matches are just as convincing as any men's matches. Content, 20-minute single match, storytelling, expressions, character, and at the end of the match, you're satisfied, and it's just good wrestler, that portion of her character should not be overlooked. That the Nakano, as heavy as she was, you see, you back then, Nakano was what, 220-pound girl, woman.
She had a very unique look. She was big and she looked like a wrestler. She looked like a pro wrestler.
Yeah, and it worked like a wrestler. And it's like these matches, some of these Japanese wrestling fans, male wrestling fans, were still prejudiced, right? Like still puzzled. And being, the Nakano, Aja Kong, Bison Kimura, Akira Hokuto, but probably were still quizzed. But yeah, they were there to show male audience what they could do. And their matches were actually just as good as what you expect from Keiichi Muto, or what I'm saying, at the time, Akira and the Mitsuharu Misawa, that if not better, these women's wrestlers are really, really convincingly, they're good, is what I'm saying. So that whatever you felt, at home before you come into the building, it's just like just leave it and just watch Nakano's match. You be fan of Nakano when you leave the building. When you left the building. Yeah, it was like
larger
that.
than life. She definitely had that
Yeah, and then she became star without doing any promos in the ring.
No
She didn't really
promos, no
talk.
singing, no movies.
No, none of that. It's just matches.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Similar to men's style. I mean, people got popular, men got popular in men's wrestling through the wrestling. There wasn't too much overlapping entertainment.
And also, I guess
crossover.
that the Japanese wrestling fans at the time was there's more to wrestling than the New Japan and Old Japan. You discovered UWF, like UWF and UWF groups that trying to make wrestling into legitimate contest. That like MMA, that the style was there. And way in the other side of extreme spectrum, people watched Onita's death matches, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and then so I think people were. Then there was a lucha libre group, that doing genuine lucha libre in Japan, and people were, I think, ready to have another style of meal or something. Yeah,
Yeah, and by the time of the early '90s, for even in the late '80s, it was quite innovative compared with everything else that was happening in the world. It's hard to explain it now, but when you see some of the kinds of wrestling or the moves, a lot of the aerial stuff, a lot of the high flying, lucha libre inspired offense, it was very, very, it was a spectacle. It was really, you wouldn't see that on any other shows unless you're at a lucha libre show in Mexico, but they really did bring by the early '90s a special element and different energy to pro wrestling that I think really influenced a lot of modern pro wrestling, men's and female.
Yeah, male and female, of course. And Japanese audience were ready to watch another style of wrestling. You know what I'm saying?
And they were ready to move
another
on
style.
from the idol era.
Not just that, but the male wrestling fans, they're more to wrestling than Antonio Inoki's school of wrestling, New Japan, and Giant Baba's school of wrestling, Old Japan. There's two major companies, of course, but then the UWF was presented. Then Onita Extreme thing presented. Then there was a couple, Wing or IWA Japan, the spin-off of Onita style deathmatch happening. And then there was like a All Japan Women, but you have JWP, there was LLPW, FMW has some women's, and there's a lot to watch that there's more to it, like a variety, that different style music or something. That you feel like, you feel like you listen to ass kicking rock and roll or the in heavy metal side, but sometimes you want to listen to good old southern rock and roll, or like a really pop to really they allow audience to really experience different style of wrestling. There are more wrestling out there that it really was like a rich period, the early '90s, that a lot of wrestling to choose from.
Mm-hmm. And it was definitely a time of innovation, not just within women's wrestling, but in Japanese wrestling. I think the athleticism got turned up a couple notches. We saw a lot of things really evolved from the '80s.
Yeah, and also by showing different style of wrestling, they forced wrestling and wrestling company, I should say, wrestling companies to be more honest to the audience. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That was early '90s. All the double count out and double DQ, or the no contest finish disappeared. You have to send people home happy. You know what I'm saying? In the reason I'm saying is like in late '70s into early '80s, that when you have NWA world title match, either if it was Harley Race or younger Ric Flair coming to All Japan and defend in his NWA world heavyweight title, that people just knew that it was going to be double count out or the DQ finish, or you know what I'm saying, that the title wouldn't change, the world title wouldn't change hands in Japan or something. And but Giant Baba was still doing it. And in hindsight, interesting that Baba was one of the first ones to change that trend, that they went to all clean finishes, winners and losers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And forced wrestling company to be more honest to the audience, that they started giving, what people want. and or these audience will go to another company. Yeah,
Mhm.
go watch other wrestling.
Yeah, it started becoming more competitive among the companies.
Yeah, and Bo Nakano was and Akira Hokuto, I should say.
Mm.
Those two are very special. That they can, like show the wrestling and the matches, the content toe to toe with Four Pillars or Three Musketeers. The Bo Nakano matches, Akira Hokuto matches, Aja Kong matches, they were every bit as good as men's matches.
Mm.
Am I making sense?
If not better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I've always been big, huge Bo Nakano fan. So it's like she's good, and also that she comes up with me like they never repeat the same match. Even they did Bo Nakano against Aja Kong many times, or the Bo Nakano against Akira Hokuto or something. They just or Manami Toyota for that matter. They will bring in like a different level match every time they come back.
Yeah, it had a different rhythm than a lot of other wrestling styles at the time too. It was pretty fast paced compared with, say, WWF
Yeah, what's
in the
interesting
90s.
is though that the people in Manami Toyota, she never watched men's wrestling growing up. Is that interesting?
I think you can tell in her wrestling though, because even the way some of the wrestlers do a body slam or do the hair throw,
Right.
or
women's original.
yeah, unique to women's to women's wrestling. The bridging
And better looking
escape.
bridges. Yeah. Better looking bridges. I was gonna say. I mean, same German suplex with bridges, right? But they have different physique and just they do it like more like a figure skating or something, right?
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot of like posing the moves. There wasn't a lot of like holding a suplex. In
Oh,
the
they
air for
go
a long
100 miles
time.
an hour, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. It goes as soon when you brought up Manami
Yeah, like a
Toyota,
marathon runner, 100 miles an hour, but they go 45 minutes.
it was kind of like the Stan Hansen idea: to go
Yeah,
100% and never really let up until the match is over.
yeah. Then you're full. You know what I mean?
And on the topic of Bull Nakano, we should also mention she's the only wrestler that I know that carried nunchucks with her to the ring.
Yeah. Oh, they demonstrated nunchucks right before the matches.
And
Well, Great
sometimes
Kabuki
she
was
would.
always doing it.
Ah, that's right.
But,
That's right.
Yeah, right.
How
Oh,
could I
she
forget
used as
that? Then she would use it as a weapon soon after too.
yeah, a little bit. For some reason, she's heel, but she was a likable heel though. For some reason. Yeah,
Maybe it's because of her look. I mean,
that's
she
about
looked
her.
cool. She looked like kind of like a comic book character. She didn't look like
Yeah, the
anybody.
blue hair sticking up.
And maybe 2 feet, 3 feet tall, and heavy metal shirt
yeah.
and makeup.
She used a can of spray every night
Wow.
to make the hair stick up. And if it didn't work, she used the glue. I mean, good old glue, you know?
Punk rock
And
style.
and then the band X in Japan was huge too at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she does look like
X,
okay.
yeah?
Yeah, they kind of had that glam look, the makeup.
Yeah, of the time, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And she was also doing, like you mentioned, Medusa earlier and Aja Kong and the kickboxing match, and later Bull Nakano had a lot of famous cage matches.
Yeah. And then the big leg drop off the top of the cage, much like your, Superfly Jimmy Snuka memory.
But a little more extreme, I would say. Leg drop's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, leg drop off the top of the cage and bounced, and she stood. You know what I'm saying?
A lot of impact.
I guess. Yeah. And then there was, starting in '92, then there was Inter-Promotion period that made women's wrestling even more popular. They were running big shows every month. Yokohama this month, the next month Kawasaki, and then eventually going of course Budokan, Sumo Palace, all the way to Tokyo Dome in 1994. Yeah, but by then that they did this traditional, more like a inherit world title thing that Aja Kong beat Bo Nakano to become the red belt champion, world champion. Then Bo Nakano left Japan and went to Mexico and became CMLL women's champion. Then came back and didn't have full-time schedule. Then went to America in at the end of '93 and had a Alundra Blayze program. By then, Medusa was back in America, and she was Alundra Blayze. But Alundra Blayze needed this great opponent. Then there was Bo Nakano Alundra Blayze program in WWF.
I remember that so vividly. I remember how different those two looked compared to everything else that was on the programs those days.
They're probably like, if you grew up as a kid in '90s, that's how you remember what women's wrestling is like.
That's the positive and good memories I have of it. It was pretty inspiring because it, like you said, the style was so different it had evolved so much. Bull Nakano's look was like anything that I'd seen at the time. Even her body shape, I never seen a woman that's that big and
thick and heavy,
but can move,
but they
like
can
a feather.
Move. Yeah.
Flying off the top
Alundra Blayze
rope.
definitely needed Bo Nakano to do what she does.
Sure.
Yeah, because Alundra Blayze was strong enough to German suplex the outsides of Bo Nakano, right?
And Bull Nakano in the States was able to, she always played the heel character, but in the States she could do that, play that role,
right? Genuine heel,
and play off the heat that the crowd might initially would give her when you would think about doing something heelish like that.
Yeah, and during that course, during the 1 month period, they wrestled 28 times in 1 month period. It's like that's every day, isn't it?
There was something special and serious about her and Toyota and Kyoko Inoue, something that was a little more intense than past generations and more wrestling focused.
During this Alundra Blayze period, there was one the Survivor Series. They brought in like 8 other Japanese girls. Remember that one?
Oh yeah. I remember watching. There was one of the programs, like the preview programs, WWF America, Wrestle America or something. It was on USA.
Right.
They were kind of
USA
preview.
Network.
Yeah, and they would show old matches and preview pay-per-views that were coming up. And I remember there was a vignette they showed with Jim Ross doing a voiceover, and they showed actual footage from All Japan women of all the competitors. And I saw Chaparita Asari do the sky.
Asari doing the spinning in the air thing.
That was it's like if I was a kid and I saw the Avengers for the first time. I mean, we didn't have that yet, but when I saw that, right. I didn't.
How'd you do that?
I didn't. I had rewound it and rewound it, and I never forget. Yeah, I mean, and she looked like she was wearing a Space Cadet's outfit. I mean, it looked like
and
then you had Kyoko Inoue.
She was little too, like a 5 feet.
Very small, very small.
Yeah.
And I also remember Aja Kong breaking her nose the next night on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
And she got a bloody nose on TV, and
it was going to be Aja being sent for next Alundra Blayze program the following year. That never took place, but it was going to be Aja against Alundra Blayze the following year. It just somehow didn't take place, but
But the 95 Survivor Series, you saw Kyoko Inoue, who had the face paint too.
Sure.
They were doing things, like I said, you wouldn't see in any other promotions in the States, only in Mexico at the time. Yeah.
Right, because there are many women's wrestlers down there. Yeah.
Yeah, the look was different.
There were a link because of Bo and Alundra Blayze, Jumping Bomb Angel before that, but there was a link between U.S. women's wrestlers, wrestling scene, and Japanese women's wrestling. It kind of mingled, in a different way than the men's wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think for that era of girls, they were ahead of their time for the United States. I think it was
because there was no such thing as women's division.
Yeah, I mean
now there's like a women's division.
Yeah, it had more history. It was based on more of its own history. So I think that's why I think if you watch it now, especially the material from the 90s, it doesn't look or feel that dated like some wrestling can feel sometimes. You remember trends of wrestling
and also you just are able to watch these Japanese women's matches with no storyline or promo.
And they were dramatic. And they were very dramatic. Some of these matches from the wrestling in the ring to the crowds just go really intense, wild, unlike a lot of male wrestling at the time too. But part of me thinks it's part of it's lightning in a bottle. It was a lot of great talent all together at the same time. I think that's part of it too. I think you had a lot of special characters that can't be recreated. Can't recreate Kyoku Inoue. Can't recreate Bull Nakano or
Manami Toyota for that matter. Yeah.
Or Alundra Blayze.
Akira Hokuto. Alundra Blayze. Yeah.
They're really
so Medusa became
Hokuto,
strong link between two countries. So the more so than the wrestling legacy itself, but she played a part, like a political part in it, orchestrated to bring in Japanese girls into WWE ring at the time. Yeah. So that was good. Now back to Japan. That inner promotion thing, company against company, thing peaked. The first peak was April of '93, Yokohama Arena, the famous show that lasted until after midnight. You were going to miss the last train, but the match is still taking place, and 2 more matches coming. And I guess all these 18,000 people decided to stay in the building after the last train. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and if you live in Tokyo, people got to realize
became a legend.
Yeah, if you miss the last train, you're in Yokohama. You're at least 40 minutes, maybe an hour away from your home if you live in Tokyo. So you got to make a decision. That's a regular decision you have to make.
Yeah, and then it was school night too. It wasn't a weekend, and there's like a legend that people were sitting outside the train station or decided to walk to a closest bar, to just sit. And some people found hotels to stay, and it's just a legend that a lot of people found each other. Those wrestling fans, in a small bar around town. There's just like, oh, did you go to show tonight? It's like, wow, we missed train too, and it's just legend, there. That was the night Akira Hokuto became the breakthrough superstar by beating Shinobu Kandori.
Oh.
Shinobu Kandori was another one who was a world champion judoka, that turned wrestler. Was never a wrestling fan, so he was almost like not an alien, but just individual who wandered into wrestling world. You know what I'm saying?
Similar to Naoya Ogawa a couple years later.
Oh, for today's fan, Brock Lesnar at the beginning. Yeah,
outside,
kind of like that. But but the tough one, real tough one,
very tough, very realistic.
In order to have in order to have convincing wrestling match with that person is incredibly difficult. But Akira Hokuto, Poldeck is such a good good worker, and also she beat Kandori very convincingly. We call it. It was like a double juice match, of course. Women cut forehead at the time. It was a bloody match.
Very bloody.
It was legendary. Then they did 3 consecutive single match that year. It became a huge program.
We should spend more time on the next episode.
Akira?
Especially. I mean, because she's really special too, and it's still
Akira Hokuto. Very special, and became bigger star than any former wrestlers on television, and she's on TV now. I mean, turn the TV on today, and then you find Akira Hokuto some channel. Either it's a food channel or the travel, or the quiz show, variety show, a talk show, or something. She's on TV all the time. And also she survived breast cancer, and she made it public and had it documented that every step the way of her making comeback, and and it just became very inspirational figure in entertainment world. Very smart woman
Yeah.
and bright.
Would you say she's a household name in Japan?
Oh, right now, she is Akira Hokuto more so than any wrestler. I mean, any former wrestler. Yeah. Oh man, well now Ricky Choshu's on TV a lot. Keiji Muto's on TV a lot, and the Maeda, the Nobuhiko Takada for that matter, and Onita's always on TV too. But Akira Hokuto can be on regular television and didn't have to present it as a former wrestler. Most of the today's TV viewer don't probably remember Akira Hokuto as a former professional wrestler. She's just Akira Hokuto.
Yeah, she doesn't wear the makeup or dye her hair the same way.
Oh no, not anymore. It just turned into TV person. Yeah,
a big smile, very different from her past.
Yeah, and then her wit
demeanor.
And so quick. Yeah,
and the way she spoke is pretty. The wrestling, especially in Japan and in women's wrestling in Japan, it's not focused on angles, promos, or storylines, but she was quite effective talking on the mic, even if you don't understand Japanese.
Oh, convincing. I think very convincing.
Yeah, she could communicate a lot just doing what she does. She was kind of like she's another one that you can't really compare her to anybody either.
Right. Little bit of Ricky Choshu in her, little bit of Keiji Muto in there, little bit of Inoki in there, right?
Yeah. Lots of charisma and kind of fearless attitude. Those crazy cannonball dives off the top of turnbuckle.
Great athlete. Oh my gosh. And also invented a lot of moves. I mean, like a twisting
Northern Lights bomb,
twisting suplex into bridges, and then all these. I mean, it's changed a little bit and never wanted to do somebody else's move, right? So whatever she did in the ring, all these big moves were pretty original. Yeah. The same way Manami Toyota was, what she does pretty original, right? So yeah.
And the approach too with Toyota, she was just so fast. She was, like you said,
like
100 miles per hour. Yeah. Just as soon as that bell rang, and she would like a cat, she would jump onto the top rope, no hands, just jump right up to the
leapfrogging,
just like a cat. Yeah. That was wild. That was wild at the time.
Yeah.
It still is.
So people have to watch and go back and watch that. Yeah.
And there's lots.
All right.
Watch.
So we were able to, I didn't know how far we were, I didn't know how far we were able to, go, but the 93, 94, 95, that in the promotion peak era, there was, people remember 1994 Tokyo Dome card, but it wasn't the peak. It was almost like the beginning of the end of the era, actually. You know what I'm saying?
It was like the last scene in the movie.
Yeah, pretty much. That Bo Nakano returns and Medusa returns as Alundra Blayze, and it was also Akira Hokuto's first retirement, right? Yeah, right. That was like almost like a beginning at the end. But there was Yokohama Arena, there was a Budokan, there was Osaka, there was Nagoya, that Tokyo Bay NK Hall, that building is no longer. But then another two more Yokohama Arena show, another Budokan show. They were running all kinds of big shows, much like today's New Japan, right? Yeah. Then in '94, the Gaia Japan started at Chigusa. After former Crash Girl Chigusa Nagayo decided to return to wrestling. Instead of coming back to All Japan Women, she wanted to start Gaia Japan, her own company. And there was 15-year-old rookie Meiko Satomura was in there.
Current WWE NXT superstar.
Yeah, so it's like that's an interesting part that we have to cover, next time. But there was this. Now we kind of look back this, early '90s Japanese women's wrestling peak period. But I was there. Rossi was there. We didn't feel that it was a boom. You know what I'm saying? I felt that it could get bigger. You know what I'm saying? And it's like we were saying that at the time, 25 years ago, right? That would boom period come back again? Oh yeah, probably, but it's not it yet. It's like we didn't think it was boom period. Now we look back, it was huge. But we were in it, and experiencing it. I was doing color commentating, for women's, All Japan women's official video series, and I didn't really feel that it was like a booming yet. I felt that it could grow even bigger.
Mhm.
And yeah, I didn't realize that it was that big. Now it's 2022. That I look back 25, 27 years ago. It's right. That was big.
Mm.
Yeah, almost 30 years ago. It is 30 years ago. Yeah, 92.
On the other side of the world, 93, 94, 95 were not popular years for pro wrestling in the US.
Then the big scandal and the steroid trial, and yeah,
it was very it was a
20,
low period.
2020 TV shows, and that was a bad period, wasn't it?
People, I mean, it's viewed nicely now. There was some great wrestling, but it's not like it was popular. I mean, compared with where it was back then, and even where it is now, it's a lot more popular now than it was in those early 90s years. So looking to Japan and seeing how successful All Japan Women and LPW were, and other Japanese companies who were doing great. New Japan was probably the biggest company in the world around that time.
The time, maybe. Yeah, and then they were running Tokyo Dome, the Osaka Dome, the Fukuoka Dome, that they're building. I mean, stadium shows.
And we'll talk about it next time, but the women would run Tokyo Dome around this time too. And looking at it from that
94.
perspective, 94. I mean, it was not a popular time for wrestling in general
in the
US. And
it was
on the other
before,
end of the
Monday Night War or NWO or anything like that.
There were women doing a women's only show at the Tokyo Dome. So
right, very interesting. Yeah.
There's a lot more to get into next week. We'll focus more on the 90s and try to get into Gaia and then
but
fallout
these
from
videos can be found on YouTube now. So I want people to watch, Bo Nakano and Akira Hokuto matches, the younger Manami Toyota Kyoko Inoue matches, Sakie Hasegawa Debbie Malenko matches on if you can find them on YouTube. Yeah, because it's worth watching. Yeah.
Actually, this is a pretty recent announcement. As it's a week old, this was announced that there's a streaming service in the United States called IWTV, Independent Wrestling Television. They do a lot. They used to do the GCW streaming, and they have licenses for lots of indie promotions to distribute their stuff on their streaming site. And as of last week, they acquired over 200 episodes of All Japan Women from this.
Oh, wow.
Talking about. So there's about 200 episodes on IWTV.
Okay. Television. Very interesting.
They did a deal with, Ladies Ring, the magazine and media company. They did some kind of distribution deal. So if you're a hardcore fan and you want to sign up for the IWTV subscription service, they have lots of old All Japan, a lot of the stuff we talked about on today's episode.
All right. So this is the way we start next week.
Yeah.
The end of this, Inter-Promotion era, and there was like as of 1997, half the wrestler quit All Japan Women. Rossi, quit All Japan Women and started his first company, Arceon. And we gotta start around there. And Gaia Japan and Neo Ladies, of course. Oh yes, yeah. So those things. Now that like in 2022, we have 15 women's company in Japan. And we'll try to get to that. And how did this All Japan women close their shop too? It was the end of the era, end of an era, definitely.
All right, we'll get into that next week. I'm excited for that too, and I think a lot of our listeners are as well. So if you have questions,
I felt a little bit disorganized, because we jump back and forth. So it will be a little bit more organized next time or something.
Well, if listeners out there wanted to ask you a question or reach out to you about anything,
please,
how can they reach you?
On Twitter at Fumihikodayo, FUMIHIKODAYO at Fumihikodayo, or Fumi Saito on Facebook.
And I'm at Justin M. Knipper, KNIPPER on Twitter. That's it for this week. For next week, let's talk about more 90s All Japan Women's and JWP and FMW
into
women.
Millennium and 21st century.
Yeah, into the modern era. So until next time.
Oh, so long from Tokyo.
Right. Write that down, Fumi Saito. Write that.
You can be a part of bringing the dreams of families to life when you consider egg donation with Fairfax Egg Bank. It's easier than you think. Fill out an application online, meet for screening appointments, and begin. Because your efforts are so important, you'll be compensated up to $60,000. So if you're a female between the ages of 19 and 30 and are a healthy non-smoker, contact Fairfax Egg Bank today. FairfaxEggBank.com. You could be compensated up to $60,000 for your time and effort in helping a family grow. FairfaxEggBank.com. They say it takes a village, but raising a family might not be for you right now or ever. And that's just fine, because you can still be a part of bringing the dreams of families to life when you consider egg donation with Fairfax Egg Bank. It's easier than you think. Fill out an application online, meet for screening appointments, and begin. The retrieval process is quick and painless and only takes about 20 minutes. Because your efforts are so important, you'll be compensated up to $60,000. This isn't a decision to take lightly, but the ability to give the gift of family and be compensated to follow your own dreams, that's a village working together. So if you're a female between the ages of 19 and 30 and are a healthy non-smoker, contact Fairfax Egg Bank today. FairfaxEggBank.com and begin the easy process of donation. Remember, you could be compensated up to $60,000 for your time and effort in helping a family grow. Use it towards the future you want for yourself. Find out more at FairfaxEggBank.com.